So guys, welcome to another camera comparison. We have the brand new Samsung Galaxy Note 8 on the right and the Oneplus 5 on the left. These are two of the best 4K dual cameras of 2017, so let's pitch them head to head and see which one wins. Now this is such an important comparison to make because if you take a glance at the phone's specification sheets, it may seem as if they have identical video taking capabilities. Both take 2160p Ultra HD video at 30 frames per second, but there is so much more hidden beneath that figure, so let's dive right into it. Talking about the general video quality and the colours and the contrast, you'll notice the Note 8 does look quite a bit better in this case. The colours have a slightly more red tinge to them as opposed to the green tinge seen on the Oneplus 5. Furthermore, colours are noticeably more vibrant and the contrast is a little bit greater too. So whilst these phones are shooting at an identical resolution, sometimes it can seem as if the Note 8 actually has a sharper and more well-defined output. Not only this, but in about 80% of cases, the images and videos that come out the Note 8 actually seem a little bit brighter. There is more light in the shots, and combine that with the extra colour makes nature photography especially really shine. The Note 8 also does far better justice to portraits. When you're taking photos and videos of people, it just makes them look much better and much more well defined against their backgrounds. Now, one of the subtle things I did notice about the Oneplus 5's camera, holding both phones side by side, is that for every equivalent shot, the Oneplus 5 is slightly more zoomed in. It captures less of its surroundings, the lens is less wide, which isn't necessarily a huge problem, and to be honest, for the most part you only notice it holding them side by side. So then we have stabilization, and for me personally this is where it gets very interesting, because you might know that the Samsung Galaxy Note 8 comes with dual optical image stabilization, and the Oneplus 5? Neither. The Oneplus 5 is backed up completely by electronic image stabilization, which was just added in a recent update, but the weird thing is here is that a lot of the time it actually does a better job. It does feel that sometimes the Note 8 with its optical image stabilization spends so much time trying to figure out what it's doing with its video to make it as optically stable as possible that it ends up often being a little bit jerky. It's a bit of an odd phenomenon, but when you're holding both these phones and walking around, the impact of your feet on the floor and the shudder it creates seems to be more of a problem for the Note 8 with its OIS than it does for the Oneplus 5 with its EIS. The one thing to bear in mind is that the Oneplus 5 is a perfect example of how cameras can be improved with software updates. The Note 8 right now is running somewhat of a pre-release software, whereas the Oneplus 5 has had a lot of time to mature, so bear this in mind and it could improve over time. The apparent 2x lossless zoom on both smartphones, surprisingly and quite interestingly, actually has rather different implications. So first of all, the Oneplus 5 actually zooms in quite a bit closer. You'll notice that when you compare the two zoomed in images side by side, you get a much more macro image on the Oneplus 5. So that means that if you're looking at telephoto objects further away, the Oneplus 5 might be doing a better job here. However, the other thing to bear in mind is that when zoomed in, the Note 8 is doing a much better job at retaining its colours and contrast. Whereas the secondary camera on the Note 8 has an f2.4 aperture, the one on the Oneplus 5 has an f2.6, which essentially means it lets less light in. So when you are zooming in, you're essentially somewhat bottlenecked by the f2.6 aperture. The slow motion on the Galaxy Note 8 absolutely blitzes the Oneplus 5. Not only are colours and contrast held up much better together, but also at 720p you're getting 240 frames per second here versus the Oneplus 5's 120. Now another interesting observation is that when you have light behind the subject, the Note 8 is far better at coping with this HDR scenario. It can do that while retaining the colour and the detail of the foreground object. Focus time is another really important specification for videographers. It essentially means that when you tap your screen to manually focus the camera, how quickly does it occur? And to be honest, on the Note 8, even on its pre-release software, it is very fast, faster than the Oneplus 5. The autofocus too, moving the camera from one object to another, just snaps into place, really is rather nice. The only thing worth bearing in mind is that it can seem a little bit jerky. You will notice that the autofocus on the Oneplus 5 is a little bit smoother. It creates a soft transition between focusing on one object to another, which actually you might argue feels a lot more natural. When it comes to taking macro shots, both cameras on their primary sensors at least have f1.7 apertures, which means you get loads of nice bokeh and really good focus on the subject itself. Both phones produce a really crisp, really sharp looking output whether it comes to video or photo. And as is the case with the wider angle shots, again with macros, the extra colour and contrast seen on the Note 8 gives photos a little bit more definition. Now having two cameras on the back of any smartphone has a lot of implications, but the largest one here is probably the portrait mode it offers. the ability to create an almost artificially high level of bokeh and depth of field, giving the effect at least of having a DSLR camera. It works really well on both. Both seem to have a very good level of edge detection, being able to detect what is the foreground, what is the background and blur accordingly. The only thing you'll really continue to notice here is the lack of colour vibrancy on the Oneplus 5. The front camera story here is a little bit unusual, because whilst the Oneplus 5 here is limited to 1080p, the Galaxy Note 8's front camera can do a whole 1440p video. So this is ultra sharp, looks really good, and you'll notice it also has a slightly wider angle, and so if you are planning on vlogging, the Note 8 does a far better job here. The audio quality on both of these is top of the line. They do a good job of removing background noise and making vocals and voices sound crystal clear. The only thing I have noticed on the Note 8, and we can put this down to pre-release software because it's an easy fix, is the fact that the front camera can take ages to focus. So there we have it, those are two of the best smartphone cameras on the entire market, pitched head to head. Whilst the Note 8 does seem like the more promising option, with better colours and contrast, better slow motion, and optical image stabilization built in, it's worth bearing in mind that the EIS built into the Oneplus 5 is really rather good, and for a lot of cases, you can't even tell it's not OIS. It is also sometimes hard to forget that the Galaxy Note 8 costs almost twice as much as the Oneplus 5. And when you factor that in, it's very surprising that a phone like the Oneplus 5 can even keep up at all. There we go guys, I really hope you enjoyed the video. I'm Mr. Who's the Boss, and I'll see you next time.